Hello, I'm John Chastain, longtime member of Friends of Freddie Incorporated and a native-born Washingtonian, D.C.ian. The many statues and monuments in Washington, D.C. are supposed to inspire great thoughts in people. The ones that succeed are familiar to all, like the Jefferson Memorial on the south side of the tidal basin where the cherry blossoms are. The statue of Mr. Jefferson may be the largest presidential statue anywhere. One Jefferson fan, President Franklin Roosevelt, insisted that the Park Service cut down a few trees so that he could see Mr. Jefferson from his White House bedroom window every morning. And who doesn't recognize the Lincoln Memorial and its statue of Honest Abe, gazing down on us, let's face it, with disappointment and concern? But there is a newer, lesser-known monument to a Lincoln admirer who acted to try and cheer up Honest Abe, Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. His statue recognizes that his dream is a work in progress. But not all D.C. statues are totally solemn and profound. Some are just fun to look at. Here's Andrew Jackson tipping his hat to the White House from across Pennsylvania Avenue in Lafayette Park. This may be my favorite statue of all, Albert Einstein sitting with a sheaf of his famous formulas, gazing at a star map of the northern sky on the black marble disk at his feet. Professor Einstein is tucked into a grove of trees in front of the National Academy of Sciences, where he is sure to attract fellow math nerds, like me. Here are the original statues at the Franklin Roosevelt Memorial, which is kind of a hike from anywhere else. Note the most famous presidential pet in history, FDR's dog Fala. Note also the voluminous cloak around Roosevelt, to which some handicapped support organizations objected when the statue was unveiled. During World War II, FDR was almost never shown standing and was always in place when cameras or visitors arrived. Nobody was supposed to know he was paralyzed. But in response to the protests, another statue was added to the memorial. A life-sized President Roosevelt sitting on his now famous homemade wheelchair, looking fully able to command. There are many statues that are not tucked into groves and parks, but are right in the middle of town. Some are still easy to overlook, like this multi-tiered classical fountain in a mini garden on Independence Avenue, across from the Botanical Garden, at the foot of Capitol Hill. Originally lit with gas lamps, it was the first monument in D.C. to be illuminated at night. It was designed by a French sculptor named Frederic Auguste Bartholdi, who later became known for something called the Statue of Liberty. But that's not in D.C., it's somewhere else. Then there's the Statue of Freedom, perched 289 feet high on the Capitol Dome. All over town you can see something is up there, but it's hard to tell what it is. Ms. Freedom is dressed in a sort of Native American princess outfit, complete with a feather on top, and she faces away from downtown Washington. The architects thought downtown would be to the east, another policy failure from Congress. Speaking of failures, let's have a look at some less inspiring D.C. statues. Remember the Lincoln Memorial? Here you see a giant golden horse, accompanied by giant naked golden people. They're all staring at the backside of Lincoln, oblivious to the snow on their own backsides. There are 4 such statues to be seen on the Memorial Bridge, symbolizing something or other about war, but you'll want to keep your eyes on the road, even if you're in a taxi. Much more interesting is the huge cavern under Mr. Lincoln in his chair. Forgotten or ignored for half a century, it's now being turned into a museum. Talk about a fixer-upper. Don't ask me how you can forget a 43,800 square foot, 3-story high cavern under a building that's been under constant curation and management since 1922. By the way, the cavern's formal name is the Undercroft. Brings to mind a similar name from Centerborough. Here's the fountain in the center of DuPont Circle, a neighborhood that manages to be both hip and high-priced at the same time. More half-naked people hold up the bowl of water, which seems to pour all its water out one side, another Washington presence that's not on the level. But beneath the leaning ladies lies another lost location, the DuPont Circle Trolley Station, which opened in 1949. But by 1962, the place was deserted and used only as a fallout shelter, complete with a stash of crackers and other goodies, to be opened only in the event the Cold War got hot. By the 20-teens, local artists leased the trolley tunnels and began to turn them into an arts center. The crackers were moved out, and an art scene moved in. It's still going strong today. Venturing underground yet again, you won't want to miss, but you probably will, The Awakening. A 72-foot-tall figure digging its way out of sand, like a congressman who successfully hid from his constituents. Originally placed at the nearly inaccessible Haines Point, it now reclines at National Harbor, a more accessible and busier tourist trap south of town on the Potomac, where even more folks can climb over it and try to guess its shoe size. Now let's see a few statues and monuments that I place in the category, what were they thinking? Take a look at the Boy Scouts of America monument on the Ellipse grounds. Holy, jump up and sit down. What's with the giant naked dad? And the giant mom with fire shooting out of her hand? How can this kid face his friends? I guess the fire trick would impress. Everyone must have run around naked in statue-making days. Here's one of the original designs for the Washington Monument. The pavilion at the bottom was supposed to house a statue of the father of our country, but such frills were among the many victims of budget cuts. However, and hang on to your seats, the Capitol did eventually acquire a statue of Big George. Shirtless, of course, I'll bet this is exactly how the great man would want to be remembered, as a sort of Roman guy, one hand pointing at the ceiling and the other pointing a sword at his own ribs. The distinctive statue was a gift, however, so Congress was afraid not to display it on the Capitol grounds for a while. To cut down on the peals of laughter, they eventually had the statue moved to the National Museum of American History, where George Washington, the Caesar, now guards the escalators and points the way to the upper floor of the museum. Not as wild as the Washington statue, but still a bit puzzling, is this 30-foot effigy of Theodore Roosevelt in Theodore Roosevelt Park on Theodore Roosevelt Island in the Potomac River. Is Teddy trying to hail a cab on the car-free island, or does he know the answer to the teacher's question? Meanwhile, back in the city, the Capitol building is home to over 100 statues, supposedly 2 favorite sons or daughters from each state and territory, though Virginia removed its Robert E. Lee statue in 2020. Anyway, one of the oddest-looking of the 99 remaining statues is Utah's homage to the inventor of television, Philo T. Farnsworth. I know statues are supposed to represent their figures as larger than life, but poor Philo looks 10 feet tall, 10 inches wide, and 50 pounds underweight. Maybe television made him look fatter. Just a few blocks north of the Capitol is Union Station, currently undergoing its umpteenth updating and reimagining. I wonder if they'll keep the 26 concrete Roman centurions that ring the Great Hall high overhead on the edge of the balcony. Notice they aren't wearing pants or even those little skirts you see them wear in movies. Originally, the statues did not hold those shields, allowing travelers to gaze up at their concrete naughty bits. We owe the shields to the protesting prudes of 1908. Back at the Capitol, sculptures were not just covered up, they were completely banished. 24 surplus columns were removed during a rebuild and are now displayed in an empty expanse at the National Arboretum. I wonder if this is intended to symbolize the hard work going on amongst the remaining pillars at the Capitol. An arboretum, by the way, is a zoo for trees. It's like a park with all the plants labeled, and this one, the D.C. Arboretum, even boasts a few bald eagles. Here's a site that transformed from a fictional monument to a real one, the Exorcist Steps. Built in 1895 during construction of the adjacent trolley car barn for use by construction workers, they now dare pedestrians to climb or descend the 75 steps between Prospect Street and M Street. Odds are, Georgetown universities know to avoid them when returning to campus from bars on M Street. The Exorcist Steps were sometimes called the Hitchcock Steps, long before the 1973 horror movie about the girl with the spinning head. Let's face it, they're spooky by day as well as by night. They continue to draw plenty of tourists, though, and in 2015 they gave D.C. the willies. The mayor of Washington hosted author William Peter Blatty and director William Friedkin at a dedication ceremony, making the steps an official sight to see. Why are the Exorcist steps important to friends and fans of Freddy the Pig? Because only 1 mile away is the house where Walter R. Brooks stayed when he registered for the draft in 1918. See, there he is in the window. The Federal Period townhouse at 2904 P Street belonged to Brooks's gadabout friend, Frank Bellamy, who didn't stay there long. Word is he didn't stay anywhere long. The house on P Street is only 3 blocks east of the intersection with Wisconsin Avenue. Thus, Washington, D.C. may be the only place on Earth where you can tell someone to go to Wisconsin and pee without getting slapped upside the head. There are only a few of the hundreds of statues, monuments, and attractions here in D.C. that I can cover, but I certainly mentioned the one famous statue in Centerboro, Mrs. Underdunk's cast iron deer, the object of the Bean Farm Animals wartime scrap iron drive in Freddy and the Bean Home News. That's the statue on the left, not to be confused with Hank the Horse posing with fake antlers on the right. But wait, statues everywhere, and not a pig to oink. I couldn't find any picture-worthy pig monuments in D.C. itself. For that, we must travel to the remote, 10 miles away, town of Falls Church, Virginia. Don't ask me why, but right next to the Volvo dealership of a former lieutenant governor of Virginia, you'll find this statue of a cigar-smoking farmer feeding 5 pigs. Or is it 6? This statue has been called disturbing by some local residents, but I think it's just plain odd, so it should be downtown with all the other oddities where tourists can appreciate it too. Thanks for listening, friends and fans of Freddy, and remember, wherever you may roam in D.C. and beyond, keep your eyes open for strange sights, and don't be afraid to point and shout, "What were they thinking?"